What's up, church family? Jason back here with Warren. So excited.
Let's go.
Let me apologize ahead of time for my voice because I spent all last night yelling as me and my guys brought home our intramural basketball championship. Shout out to the amateur astronauts if you're listening. I appreciate you guys. But I'm sure my voice is like cooked a little bit. It's warmed over, but we're going to get through it. We're going to make sure it sounds awesome. Apologies for those that listened to last episode where my mic came unplugged for half a second again. And then it sounds like I'm talking into a tin can with a string into another tin can, you know, like we're just doing it from a treehouse to treehouse. So super excited to talk about creativity today.
Let's go.
So Warren, we've talked a little bit, pre-recording and it's funny. I think today you are going to be a great kind of sounding board for people listening who maybe paint people like me as a creative, which I appreciate. It's not like nobody's dissing me by calling me creative, but I think everyone is a creative. And today I feel like this episode is kind of the way I'm painting it is I'm going to make the argument that everybody's creative. And there's certain features of creativity, right? There are certain aspects to creativity that culturally we paint in ways that we shouldn't. And I don't mean paint literally. I mean, we categorize things in specific ways because of how our culture is built, how the kind of, social collateral happens, right? Like the mystique of creativity. That's kind of what I want to do is, and I'm not the first person to do it. I've heard other people kind of take a stab at it, but from the angles that I'm going to pick, I'm trying to be original in this and remove the mystique of the kind of, ethereal and misunderstood creativity. When you talk about creativity, people are like, oh, that's not me. More times than I can tell you. I have heard I'm not creative or excuse me. I'm not the creative type. Or of course you can do that. Like as a professor of graphic design, they're like, well, of course you do that. You're creative. As if like I've achieved some level and I've kind of like put myself apart and now you could never even understand what I'm doing. Right. And the interesting thing about creativity is because I'm a graphic designer, the things that I do with graphic design, I might agree with people, right? So there's things I can do in the programs I use in the computer that other people can't do because that's just the field I've chosen to spend my time in. Yeah. The same is true for the first thing I thought of is like a police officer, a fireman, you know, someone who does metalwork, someone who does carpentry, someone who's building furniture. They know things that I have not spent time learning that maybe I could, but then people tend to paint that as like you have a specialty skill set. Yeah. Right. And so in a weird way though, hardly anybody says to a firefighter, right? Like, oh, I could never do that. I could never put water on fire because they simplify it, right? Culturally, we simplify that thing where creativity is such a broad topic that we tend to, I don't know, like back away from it. Like, I don't want to be painted as creative because what could happen? Somebody could judge what I've created and then they could, say that it's not, right? It's subjective. Yeah. Whereas like objectively, if you're putting out a fire, it either worked or it didn't, right? Like we put out the fire, it worked, the water doused it, it's good. So there is some ways though to attack or to pursue that's what pursues better. Pursue creativity, right? In ways that are free from, kind of the subjective and make it a little more objective, like specific things you can target or, kind of misconceptions that we can just abandon. And then it will help open up creativity for whoever you are listening. Whoever, like for you, Warren, we're going to crack that open because in talking a little bit, I feel like, you felt similarly to what we're talking about, where you paint me and you congratulate me. You thank me for my creativity all the time, like with the podcast and editing and doing all these things. But I would say there are just different ways that everyone is creative. And I'm not trying to do that thing where you say like everybody gets a participation trophy. Like it's not like that. I actually think everyone is uniquely creative in a way that would be trophy worthy. But it is just in certain areas. It is in areas that we focus our time and energy, because I believe God created us, right, to be creative beings.
Okay.
And we can be destructive, right? Yeah. But I think creation is an inherently God designed thing where he's given us free will. He's given us a mind. He's given us a passion, right? And he's built us with the desire for purpose. And so as you pursue those purposes, creativity naturally comes out, right? It's something where you can help define who you are. You can help define the world around you, or even better, shape the world around you in more positive ways. So all of that is creativity. So what do you think? Daunting task today, talking about creativity?
Ooh.
What does a former Navy Master Chief think of that?
We're in your wheelhouse today with creativity, right? Number one, you sound great. You sound great, man. You're doing good. So
keep lying to me about it. Make me feel good about it.
You're good, man. So, from the perspective of creativity, right? I think that, creatives are celebrated, and I'm just going to use that. You're going to unpack that, but I'm going to just use that from my definition, I'll use that for people who are celebrated for what they have created, as in, i.e. art, as in things that are celebrated, as in music, spoken word, things that are built, just artistry, right? I believe life in itself is art. I think when God in the Bible, it says in Genesis, when God made us, he stepped back and he made the world and he said, "Oh, that's good."
That's right.
I think he was looking at what he created, right? He looked at his masterpiece and was like, "Wow, this is beautiful. This is," and I think that we have an opportunity to kind of partner with God as we live the life that he's given us, to kind of like do the same thing with our lives. We get to create the spaces. We get to create how our life kind of flows and looks, because God's given us this free will. But I believe that creatives are celebrated. Like they are revered. They are, people look to them like they have some superpower. And for many reasons, I mean, they can do things that you just sit there like, whoa. Like there's been some designs that you've created, for church that I'm just like, man, it's some of them are complex. Some of them are like really simple. I'm like, man, that's so good. I couldn't do that. Right. And it's celebrated. Okay. And in the world, this is magnified. If someone can get on stage and sing a song, we're just like, we're in awe. Right. Or if you've ever seen those people who draw pictures, right? They just, in 5 minutes, they can take a blank canvas and blow your mind. And you're like, whoa. Yeah. Wow. How did your mind's eye see that? Right. Architects who build these phenomenal buildings like all across the world. And you're like, how is that even standing? Right. Creativity is celebrated on that scale of where people are in awe of things that you cannot do. Right. But like you said, I think unpacking what that really means, I think that's what we're going to get down to today, because most people are like, yeah, I'm not creative. I kind of go with the flow. I color inside the lines. That's what you do in the military, right? Like you follow orders, you color inside the lines. Obviously, I'm a great line color inner guy. You don't make Master Chief if you can't color in the lines, right? And so we don't use that creative, for all intents and purposes, muscle, right? In our own lives, because we feel like that our lives are a blank coloring page, and all we have to do is just fill it out, right? I think that's what most people feel like. It's too hard to draw the outline. All I need to do is follow the template, go to school, get decent grades, take care of my credit, save for the future, do everything that the world tells us to do to have a great life. And therefore it kills, what I see, it kills like the fire of what God created us for, because we're all unique. But life will tell us, follow this path and you'll be successful. And really, God didn't create us to all be on the same path. Our paths should all lead to him. But the most amazing thing about us is that he's made us all unique. And I think we've lost our creativity because we think that creativity is those people who are celebrated. for something. And so that's kind of my perspective for, it's why I kind of feel sometimes, I know the things that God has kind of given me that are unique, but also I feel like when it comes to being a creative, there are just people out there who are in a whole nother world. Right. And I'm not in that special group of people. Right. I'm not in the group of people who can create, something out of nothing, and have the world in awe. Like, now I can speak some, God's given me kind of that gift, but when it comes to like, the things that you do, Jason, and your counterparts, and it's just like, wow. Not only is it celebrated, people are compensated extremely well for being creative. Right. So that's kind of where I'm at, in the whole scheme of things.
That's kind of my challenge with this though. So I'm not gonna contradict you. I think I agree with what you're saying, but that's kind of the challenge or the misconception that I want to like break apart a little bit. Is the reverence that creative people get because it's a unique form of creativity, or not even the uniqueness. It's like the most fulfilling way of being creative for another person's life. So if you write a song that connects with people, right, then there's a little more reverence to that, because I think we are all selfish. Like that's how, that's what happens in a sinful world is you become selfish, self-centered. And I think what happens is the athletes of the world, that are creating moments through particular skill sets, the musicians, the actors, whatever type of creativity that is most fulfilling for the audience becomes what we revere. But is not a mom creative when they have a baby? And is that not more complex than throwing a football? Is that not more complex than drawing something on paper for 5 minutes? Now, it's different, and lots of women have babies, so it's not as unique, and I'm putting it in air quotes. But to me, kind of the first thing, I have kind of this list of 3, either areas or misconceptions of creativity. And you brought up one of them, execution, right? So the execution of your creativity ends up in reverence or not because of cultural, the benefit to others. So if a mom has a baby, it doesn't benefit a cheering crowd. It doesn't help fulfill their lives, right? But it certainly is far more complex, miraculous, creative than, and I'm not minimizing these things that I would list, but like an athlete or a musician or an actor, it is unique coming from someone's brain, but we celebrate the execution. And so what happens is it scares people off if they can't execute creativity in this particular subset of ways that we revere and tend to throw financial backing at, right? If they can't do those types of creativity, they say that they're not creative. Like you talked about. So I get paid to answer creative questions, I would say. That's like my job as a professor, is I'm teaching, and all teaching should be is like I'm answering creative questions. Well, especially as a graphic design professor, I'm helping you solve creative problems. That's kind of the idea. You want to advertise a thing, you want to build a brand, you want to just display something that's beautiful. It's just a creative solution that you're seeking, right? It's just a problem to solve. So there's an execution that outwardly people enjoy because it adds something to their lives. Well, the challenge of that is, oh, I can't draw. I can't sing. I can't act. So then people are like, I'm not creative. Really? So could you pick up a shovel? Well, yeah, I could pick up a shovel. Sure. Oh, could you dig a small trench in your yard? Yeah, I could. Oh, so you could create a garden that would literally feed people. Like, is that not creativity? Is that not helping sustain your family?
Yeah.
Right. And on a grander scale, do we celebrate farmers? I don't think so. Not necessarily. No. Like, do we hand clap if a farmer comes out on stage? Only in rare circumstances. No. But I got to tell you, we're not eating without the farmers of America.
Yeah.
Right. And so a farmer, I feel like most of the time would walk up to someone who's a musician or artist and say, oh, I'm not the creative type. Like, really? because I'm pretty sure you create all of the perfect environments to feed the world. So no big deal, but we don't have reverence for something that is seen as a given or like typical or not unique because it's doing something that's been done.
Wow.
But man, if that's not creative.
Wow.
Right? Someone's doing carpentry on your house, and many houses have been built before, but recently we had work done at our house, and I have to tell you, that's a creative endeavor. You have to figure out the angles of the wood for the floor. And by the way, I don't want someone who's not creative, because every house has its own challenges, its own layout. And so you're cutting the wood in a typical fashion, right? That people have done many times before. I don't want one like that.
Yeah.
I don't want one like that. I want somebody who's like, oh yeah, that is a unique board in your house. I'm going to cut it in a creative way to make it fit into that space.
Yeah.
I want somebody who's thinking outside the box. They're just thinking outside the box in a particular field that we don't revere. And so execution, how you execute your creativity, is why people run away from their creativity sometimes, because the execution isn't celebrated. Right? The execution of mine is celebrated because it tends to be public. And by the way, let me be clear, not always. Like sometimes people look at art or music and are like, I don't like it. You know, I can't tell you how many times I've heard somebody say, oh yeah, I listen to everything but country. I'm like, okay. But to me, that's them judging execution of creativity, where in my mind, I want to be like, you know what? Whether I prefer that type of music or not, I can value the level of creativity that took to build that. Because there's types of music that I love, right? I love hip hop and pop. But then I hear some songs and I'm like, well, I don't love this hip hop or pop because it's not genuinely creative, right? It's what you call cookie cutter. Like, oh, they're just riding a trend, and like, but when people write their own songs, when you feel like the artist is in it, when you feel like there's some unique aspects they're adding in, ooh, then I like it, right? They're adding. Now, how many jazz songs have been written? How many times has a trumpet or drums or a saxophone been played? But I tell you what, when you hear it, it's not necessarily unique, but why do we like it? Because it's their execution, and you're like, ooh, okay. But if they were afraid to do it because other people have executed it better, right? And that's why we run away from creativity, right? Oh, well, Jason can design something better in Photoshop, so I'm not going to touch Photoshop, said Warren. Well, hold on. Just because I executed it already doesn't mean, right? Or there's some reverence for what I did. It doesn't mean you're not. I think execution and the celebration of execution and people steering away from it is a fear-based thing. Like, I don't want to dare say I'm creative, because then I'm held to the standard of like, well, I have to achieve the reverence that this person got. Or mine's not as special, so I'm going to feel shame about it. Those kind of things. Like, so when you say you're not creative, come on, no way. Like, and I'm not mean you, I'm just saying anybody that would say that, yes, you are. Right? I cannot think of a person that has lived and is not creative.
Makes sense.
Oh, well, I'm not creative. I'm just a farmer. Wait, didn't you build the home that you live in? Well, yeah, but that, I followed a template. Hey, man, like, you created something.
Yeah.
You brought something into the world that didn't exist before.
Yeah.
That's amazing.
Wow.
And so we just discredit it because, like, well, I can't make $1 million from farming. I can't, I'm not going to be a millionaire like a famous athlete or something. They're not going to fly me private if I grow more corn well. Yes, but that creativity is so important. We need it in the world. So execution is what we celebrate. And I would argue people run from creativity because of the execution in their own life, the way they execute creativity that they devalue. Usually because of external reinforcement.
Wow.
So that was my first one.
Dude.
I feel like I'm repeating over and over to like drill it home and make sure I make the point. Yeah.
I like how you unpacked it, how you started the conversation about creativity, kind of like undoing the myth of what creativity is. And you compared like the professional athlete to the mother, right? It reminds me of a story about my daughter. She, her name is Calais, and she repeated the first grade.
Okay. She liked it so much she did it twice.
Yeah. This was for her, this was devastating. She didn't understand why her friends were moving on and she wasn't. Right. And so it was her reading that kind of held her back. And being a father of 7 kids, and she being my second to last baby, I've been through this a couple of times because kids learn to read at different levels. I don't always agree with how the school system kind of does things because kids have a way of catching up to their peers, but they kind of develop in different aspects, right? So she didn't meet all the wickets to go on to 2nd grade. And so she did 1st grade again, and me and her mother decided that we would put an extra emphasis on helping her get better at reading with the sounds and stuff, right? And a lot of the school stuff wasn't helping her. And so we incorporated flashcards and all kind of stuff just to kind of help kind of kickstart like her brain to kind of put all this together. And between me and her mother, just being creative, like using those things she already likes to help her make that connection. Man, when she made that connection, I mean, she's doing so well in school, and now she reads everything. Like it doesn't matter if we're in the car, she stops, she's reading the signs, she's reading like everything. And I'm like, amazing when it clicks, but it took a little bit of ingenuity. Like, okay, there's stuff that already exists, but it doesn't fit our kid. Right. Yeah. So we have to reinvent material to help her make this work for her. Right. For this to work in her brain, we have to, number one, not only take an interest in it, but we have to present it to her in a different way. Right. And so I wouldn't have like chalked that up to being creativity. I would have just chopped that up to like, let's get it done. But I think sometimes we speed past like the things in life where we have to think outside the box or think differently to help our children grow, help our careers grow, help whatever we're working on grow, and even how we reach people for God, like how we approach people. Like some people, it won't be a conversation. Maybe it'll be just them watching how you live your life and the joy that you have. The creativity that you go throughout your day helps them reach a relationship with Jesus because they're like, wait a minute, hold up.
Yeah.
This happened to me. I didn't respond that way. Right. Or I see what you're going through. I don't understand why you still have joy. Right. Just being creative on how we cope with everyday life. Right. And so to me, I wouldn't have chalked it up to like, hey, that makes you creative. Hey, that is creativity. You're creating something. Like you're creating 100%. A pathway for people to meet Jesus. You're creating a pathway for your kid to learn how to read and whatever challenges you meet. Like, and so for me, that's like, okay, rethinking what it means to be creative. And I like just how you unpack that. Like, that's refreshing for the world to be like, I create, like to sit back and be like, I'm made in the image of God. Not only does he create things, I create things too. This is awesome.
Well, yeah. So that kind of gets to it. So the execution of like, you had to come up with flashcard ideas. You guys banded together. And by the way, group projects, collaboration on creativity is even more difficult, right? Yeah. So you added a layer where you and your wife are like working together. We're trying to figure it out. You're working with the school system, figuring out how to help, and she's struggling. So you're trying to find that kind of creative antidote, like what keeps her engaged when she wants to learn to read while also not scaring her off from it. You know, like, you have to create a perfect environment. So there's a balancing act happening in that creativity that is underrated. But what I would say is there's just about no chance that if you walked into a stadium full of people and they said, you know, Warren Brown coming to the stage, he helped his daughter learn to read. You know, like the crowd's not going crazy because it's something we take for granted as creative. But here's an interesting thought. Your daughter someday becomes president, right? And she's not going to be able to do that if she can't read, most likely. I mean, political jokes aside, that just flooded my head. You know, she's not going to be able to do that if she can't read, practically speaking. They would not bring you a medal. You're not going to get a plaque that says the mom and dad that helped her learn to read. Congratulations. But man, if you hadn't gotten creative about helping her learn to read, she feels so defeated that this like butterfly effect of, you know, shame or disgrace or whatever that is, because of her lack of being able to read that you had to creatively solve, That doesn't get solved. She doesn't become president.
Mm-hmm.
Now, again, the reverence we're talking about, it made me think of something. And I this is unfair because I'm bringing a question to you that I don't even know that I've fully thought through or have an answer for. So I'm curious what your take is on this, and we can kind of spend some time talking about it. Why do we revere creativity that is extracurricular?
Ooh.
Specifically. So here's what I thought of. So we're talking about a lot of creative ways where like a lot of people have babies.
Mm-hmm.
Everybody has to learn to read, right? But it's all in unique ways. Okay. Why? And I'm kind of unpacking it myself. I don't know the answer.
Mm-hmm.
It seems like we revere artists,
mm-hmm.
athletes,
mm-hmm.
musicians, and actors.
Yep.
Those are the four kind of categories, right?
Yep.
And I do too, by the way. I admire what they do, but I just had this weird thought. Why do I admire so much those particular four categories? And again, none of this is, I mean, I would gladly hang out with whatever these people. There's nothing, no shame in it. And by the way, I'm kind of in the artist category, right? Not to like pump myself up too much, but whatever. That's where the world would kind of categorize me. Why is it that we value the extracurricular ones so much? Because in theory, and just follow me here, if they all disappeared, it doesn't like dramatically injure any one person's life, you know, other than them, that's their career. But I'm saying like grand scheme of things, if the NBA, NFL, MLB, NHL all went away, Major League Soccer, gone. Premier League, all the major soccer leagues in the world, most popular sport on earth, they're all gone. All of a sudden, we can't make movies. Gone. We can't do art. Gone. The world is more drab. And so maybe I'm answering my own question. It like brings color into the world, but like the world's a little more boring. But it seems like the things that we value most are the distractions, like the extracurricular ways of being creative.
You gotta tag me in on this one.
Right. Okay. Yeah. So that's what I'm trying to do. I
think you kind of hit it right on the head. And this may like, I don't want to be like, hey, he's getting preachy here, right? But
just step on toes.
But this is just reality, right? We live in a fallen world. It's legitimate. We 100%. Live in a fallen world. So the distractions are what gets all the attention. To me, I thought it's funny you brought this question up because I ponder on it often. I'm like, it's funny because we'll celebrate an actor and a team that made a movie that a lot of people will never get to see. And they get awards and they're celebrated and they're plastered all over the place, right? And really, it kind of boils down to what? Entertainment, a distraction from real life. But we never award teachers. We never award churches who usher people into relationships with God. These things are never celebrated. And I'm like,
no. Hold on.
So the distractions of
you celebrate them some.
I
right?
mean,
I just want to be fair. Hold on. Because if people hear it, I don't want to be like, oh, they say we never. Like, well, I got a Teacher of the Year award.
On this, so you got a Teacher of the Year award, right? Who knows that?
So that was cool.
Who knows that outside of your school?
Oh, you're saying publicizing in terms of like it being out there.
Yeah.
Understood.
So what is fed to us? What comes
like
up on our feed?
Media.
Yeah. What comes up on our feed? What comes into our eyeballs? What the world wants us to see are the distractions. They don't want to see the things that have anything to do with what life is really about. Is life really about entertainment? And I love basketball and all these sports. Is life really about those things? You said it. If these things disappear, we move forward, right? But if we stop educating people, if we stop reading, right. if all churches close their doors, right, life would look completely different, right? So I think we celebrate the distractions, right? Because we live in a fallen state where the distractions will get the attention of the world. The distractions lead us more to what we shouldn't be doing and take us off of what we should be doing. And granted, most people are like, well, that's kind of boring. You know, it's you got to go to school. And so why is it not exciting? Why is it not celebrated? Why aren't teachers paid more? Why isn't why have we taken prayer out of the school system? It's because the distractions have taken over, right? And ultimately, right, the world in general want to pull us as far away from God as possible. And so real. I think creativity is celebrated in nonsense things. I'm not saying that art and music and all these things aren't important, right? But in the whole grand scheme of things, in the whole grand schemes in the world, right? How important are they?
Yeah. I mean, it's contextual a little bit. Like, and this is not to be contrarian, but like in the Bible, it talks about the design of the temple, right? And that there's beauty in it. There was architectural build, and one of the early ones, Exodus or something. I mean, even lays out the meters or cubits.
Gives you all the directions, all of the.
Yeah. So there's I think it's God designed to be creative that way, but I think what we're talking about is the cultural extremes.
Oh yeah.
Right. The worship.
The unbalance, right?
Right. The unbalanced admiration of the athlete or the actor. Or, by the way, those people, interestingly, a lot of times will tell you, like, I don't understand because I just do this thing, like, and to their credit, like, there are athletes and actors who are like, man, I just enjoy the thing I do. But it's interesting, as a world, we throw our money at and celebrate those things. And I don't think they're always bad.
Not bad.
It's just like, what an interesting thing.
Yeah.
Right. How they execute. But what I was getting to is that is the distraction thing, or like the, what do we call it? The extracurricular. Mm-hmm. Like, why is it the things that there's very few super important creative processes that you would also categorize as mundane, maybe like day to day, that anybody celebrates. And maybe because it would get exhausting. Like, I don't know, I love these thought experiments. Like, if we always did a standing ovation for every teacher that walked in the classroom, would that be weird? Or like, should we do that? I mean, I don't know. I like thinking through those things because I think it matters.
I do. I think it matters.
I don't want to scare people off of creativity. I think that's the goal, is to get people back to thinking like you can be creative too.
I think it is so vital because, and it's even biblical, right? It's kind of like, if we get our reward on earth for doing the work of God, right? Then what reward will we have in heaven? Right. And so, it's kind of like, it's designed that way. And I'm like, man, like, you can spend your life entertaining people, right? And after the lights go off and after the championship is won, they walk back into this miserable life. And maybe you separated them from what they're going through for a period of time, right? That's one thing you can do with your life. And you can use that particular platform to also help change people. But if you have an actor or an athlete or anybody in the spotlight, politician, who points to faith, God in any way, what happens? Yeah. Immediately, right? Their popularity will sink. They'll probably be canceled, right? And so, but the people who live for this, right? They live with their faith. They faith forward. They live with Jesus first. And we may only touch one or two people, Jason, because we're talking about creativity, but we're weaving in the most important creative thing, and that's Jesus. And that's our relationship with him, right? We may only affect one person, right? But that one person is more precious than all the millions in the world and all of the distractions, because it points them to the solid foundation of what life is really about. And that won't be celebrated here, but it will be celebrated there. Right. And so, man, I love it. That, I wish that we could, put the main thing on the main stage more. Yeah. But that's just not how it is. But we were built to carry that mantle. I love how you carry that mantle into what you do, right? Into your graphic design and how your faith kind of touches all. It kind of rounds about like everything that you do. And then what we get to do, we get to incorporate God in those little moments of our own creativity. We get to be those shining lights in places that are dark. And so that's a very unique and special thing. And I'm excited to be a part of it, man. I'm here for it.
Me too, man. I think it's awesome. I think we've hit it on a little bit. The next portion or part of creativity that I thought of, and I really wrote down one word for each of these. So it's kind of being molded and shaped by our conversation a little bit. So we talked about execution, right? Like how it's executed, and kind of, I think you brought up the reverence part. So then I kind of keyed in on that. The next thing I wrote down was styles, like people's style of creativity. This is one thing I want to get out there because I have students over and over do this. I will compliment their style of creativity, like what they've done, how they've created it, what their kind of thought process was, right? I will celebrate the ways in which they executed the project, right? But they tend to, if they say something negative about their own work, they're criticizing the style. Oh no, it's not that good. I didn't do this. I could have done this better. I don't like this color. I mean, you know, it's fine, and it's really interesting. It's when I compliment it that they begin disrespecting their own work. And it's something about the style. But I'll tell you what, those same students would be glad to compliment me about something I make. And I'm not saying mine is worse, and so they're lying. I'm not saying anything in particular about the quality. It's just an amount of time I've spent and an amount of study I've spent on what color combinations or ways to use the programs that we use. And it's, remember, we talked about this a little bit earlier, I believe. It's like the carpenter spends a lot of time figuring out what types of wood work best and how to build that furniture, or I know carpenters who houses usually, sorry, I love wooden furniture, so that's what it keeps coming back in my brain. But like when the guy's making that beautiful chair, he's learned what tools to use, and I would be lost in that workshop if you asked me to just build the chair and gave me no direction. These students that have had very little direction in comparison to what I've gotten are feeling the same way. And I'm telling them, no, for where you're at, this is a beautiful chair, right? This is a beautiful poster you've made, or I love where this is headed. And they tend to criticize the style, or they hope for a different style. Oh, but I like what you did, right? And I guess what I'm saying is creatively, with humility, might I challenge everyone to embrace the style of creativity you have. Because when you fully dive into the style, I think it's like God has put that in your life, whether it's through nature, like you're born with it, or it's been nurtured by something. Everybody has a particular style. So if I gave somebody a pencil and said, draw a cheeseburger, that cheeseburger would look different every single time, right? But if you spent 1,000 hours with a pencil in your hand, right, and I spent 1,000 hours, I think we would both be good, but have different output, right? Like the more time you spend on your craft, the more your style comes out. So what people do is they don't even get a chance to figure out what their style is because they run from the execution because of the criticisms that the world brings, because there isn't a reverence. So for some students, if they're not celebrated right away, if there's a criticism, they then don't get to the next layer of style, right? They are waiting for confirmation. They're waiting for approval before they can create more.
Question. I have to ask you this, like in this moment. So do you find that when you just in application, right? When you find that when they are struggling, right, with their own execution, right? Do you see people adopt like ways of doing things that are just cookie cutter? And so therefore they muddle their way through the execution, and therefore their style becomes like whatever the norm is? Or
so I'd say it like this. Ready? Photoshop, Illustrator, InDesign. These are the programs we use. I mean, there's more. Like we're recording on Riverside. I use Premiere Pro, mostly Adobe products to edit things. There's a bunch of ways to use Photoshop. There's a bunch of ways to use Adobe Illustrator. There's also a lot of ways to ride a bike. But if I gave you a bike for the first time and said, go ahead and ride it, no hands, or go ahead and ride it, but like stand on the seat while you're holding the handlebars. Like I've seen people do tricks like that, you know? Or like say it's one of those not BMX. Am I saying the right thing? BMX with like the pegs on the back, you know? Yeah. Like, you jump off the seat and you're using the pegs and turning it like these dudes at the X Games used to do. If I told you that, but you'd never ridden a bike before, then I guess in answering your question, you'd have to start with what's considered cookie cutter because you have to learn the basics, right? So you can get a little creative if you're learning, but the danger is you might stumble and fall, which is okay. And so I encourage my students to fail more. So the more times you fail at whatever perfection that you think you're seeking in your design work, the closer you're going to get to whatever you think that is. There's no perfect piece of design. If I had 1,000 years and one poster, I could spend all 1,000 years tweaking it, perfecting it, getting it pixel perfect. But there's never a moment where you're just going to get it perfect down to the minuscule detail. And you have to be okay with that because we don't live in a perfect world, but you can get it more than good enough. You can get your work to look excellent. But the riding the bike analogy is kind of what I use. Like, or if I'm teaching you to bake a cake, there's in theory, infinite ways to make a cake.
True.
Right. But you're going to have your idea of it, but you have to learn, like, you need flour. You need sugar, or, you know, by the way, somebody that's playing a semantic game is going to ding me on that. Like, well, you could use almond flour. You could use stevia. No, I just mean like you need to know the basic ingredients that hold the foundation of a cake together. And then you can make a cake that looks like a flamingo, right? You can build a cake that looks like the Empire State Building and like all these cooking shows where it's like they make them look like something else. You learn those things because you learn the basics. But if you don't know the basics, so does that answer your question? Like they have to dive into the,
that does
what might be considered mundane or basic you have to learn how to dribble a basketball with each hand before you can cross over between your legs.
That is.
You're not going to do well if you don't know basics.
I have a statement / question. So to kind of flip that on its head, take a little bit of an off ramp, right? What I'm hearing is that the foundation is extremely important. That you got to have this foundation of what you're doing, right? So apply that to life in general. We're parents, right? So if a child doesn't have a foundation that is founded on the word of God, on God, right? There are lives that are founded on all other kind of stuff, right? And so they have a flawed foundation. So they don't get they can't learn how to really be like what God created them to be because they don't have the foundation of what life is about. That's right. And that's kind of my concept. Like, wow, that's how that's how the distractions kind of take away from building that true foundation, right? Like if you grow up in a home that does not have a knowledge of God, then you grow up in the world where you're like, yeah, but church is something we do on Easter and Christmas and, you know, every now and then. You don't really have a relationship with Jesus. It's kind of like when you are an adult and you have that encounter with Jesus and you're born again. It's kind of like your life is reset and your foundation is now new. And now you can learn, you can start putting the creativity of and understand, what am I here for? What is my purpose? What did God create me for? And that's kind of how to relate. I just kept hearing it as you were talking about the bike. And I'm like, you're right. If you don't learn how to ride the bike, you won't learn to do the tricks. You can't start with the tricks. And I think we have a bunch of people in this life, and I'm thinking any of us have it completely figured out. We're just walking with God. And there's a bunch of people who think they've got it figured out and they're not walking with God. And they're like, hey man, you're just doing a bunch of tricks in your life. You don't even have the foundation of what this life is really about. And what you'll find out is that the trick of getting all the money ain't gonna make you happy. And the trick of being highly successful at whatever you're doing is not going to fulfill your life. You really need God at the center and all the rest of this stuff, right? It's just flamingos and flowers like you were talking about. It's just pizzazz to the foundation of what God created your life to be. And so
Right.
And that was kind of the statement question. I was like, that just creatively, like, that was a creative way of saying that's what's happening to people in general. Like, having that foundation in their life of Christ helps them really, like, meet the design that God has for their life, the peace, the joy, the things that only come with having that relationship, and true creativity, right? Because then you really get to create the things that God has made for you to create.
Yeah. The first thing I thought of was, excuse me. The first thing I thought of was foundation, right? Firm foundation in God allows you to more easily create relationships with other people.
I knew you were going there. I knew you were going there.
Come on, that's it. Like, you talking about creativity. It takes real creativity to be friends with someone, or at least manifest relationships, right? How am I going to approach that person? What am I going to say in response? Like, we learn ways of creativity just in interacting, right? What's the slang you use that kind of signifies you as a person, and why do we look for those things? Because it's kind of your creative execution style, confirmation of who you are. So, I like saying dude, man, and that's cool. Or, like, I'm trying to think, I don't know, even use the word like. I think about that during the pod sometimes.
That's funny.
Overusing the word like is just part of you see things, you pick them up, you learn the habits from the world around you, like learning language, right? That's a creative process, because you're not born understanding French, Spanish, English, whatever it is. And so you learn through repetition, you build a foundation, and then you can go learn the slang.
So good.
Right? Then you get into the specifics of your culture. And by the way, I just think about America, like North versus South. We all speak the same language, but there's people that argue that's not even the same language. It's so different.
Wow.
Has the same basis, but totally different tricks, if you will, totally different execution and style. So I guess that would be what I would say is, like, that's a perfect like macrocosm, like the wider look at what I was talking about. Like, the students have to learn. If you're a student of anything, it really is fundamental that you build a foundation that's at least solid enough that if you begin to do the things that are a little more difficult, a little more tricky to execute, that it's not just going to crumble. Right? Now, sometimes you might have to start over. That trick didn't work. That the way of doing something creative, almost never do I create something that the first time I'm exceedingly happy with. You kind of put the thing together, you look at it on the screen for a minute, and you say, I'm going to try this color here instead. I'm going to look at it. Like, when we do the backgrounds for these podcast episodes, I go through a few images. Sometimes I nail it the first image, like, that's the one. That's the one. But then, even then, I got to choose a color text that works over top of those color. You're thinking about all these things, but because I have a foundation of how to use the programs, I'm not hindered by going, okay, now where do I go to find that color? It's just second nature, where I go, the color swatches are over here. I just move my layers. So for those that don't know, in all the design programs, it's built like a cake or like a cheeseburger. If you look at it from overhead, and if you have something on layer 1, you can't see it if something on layer 2 is covering it. Like, if you looked at a cake from above, you
can't see the bottom.
You'd only see what's on top. Yeah. And so that's how I teach it to my students anyway. By the way, I also noticed that is the second time I've referenced both cake and cheeseburgers in this episode. I totally unplanned. Guys, make sure you eat healthy, do the right things for your body. So to me, creativity is all these things that shouldn't be scary, right? Build a foundation in the things. So then when you play, it's not nerve-wracking. All right, you guys.
Let's go.
And through the magic of editing, we are back instantaneously.
We're back.
Though in the real world, we were gone for about 10 minutes.
You didn't even know we're gone.
Yeah, it was magic. Look. So anyways, we were saying abandon any shame over your creativity and go after it head on. That's where I was headed.
Yeah.
So in that magical 10-minute break, Warren, you mentioned that you have a question for me.
Absolutely.
You'd like me to answer. Okay.
So
I am mentally, physically, and spiritually prepared.
You ready? You ready for this?
I'm ready.
Can you give us some practical, I'm talking about the people who don't think that creativity is a part of their life or they're not creative. They may feel like there's nothing about them that is creative at all. Can you give them some benefits to lean into some of the things we talked about today to kind of adjust their relationship with what they think creativity is? What are some of the benefits of like stepping out of their comfort zone? Being able to be comfortable with the things, because honestly, I'm telling you, I really believe that there's some things that God has spoken into people's lives to do. I'm speaking specifically to people who are walking with God, who are sitting on their hands because they don't think they're good enough. They don't think they're educated enough. They don't think that what they bring to the table is needed, nor will it be celebrated. And I believe that the enemy has them hostage in what their life mission should be, like what their God's called them to be. And I feel like maybe you can speak to a part of like loosening that up, to saying, hey, have more confidence in, because I'm gonna be honest. And even for me at times in my life, I was just like, I don't think I can speak as well as other people. I don't think that, and I compared myself to everybody but myself. Right. Okay. But when God puts you on mission, I think, you should do that mission regardless of what people are going to say, because I think that a lot of that rhetoric is happening in our own heads, and it keeps us from fulfilling the mission, of God for life. And I know you deal with this firsthand, helping people see the goodness in what God has created in them to help push them forward. So what are some benefits, to lean into what we've talked about today?
So you're saying benefits, which I totally appreciate. Like that's like a, knowing like the outcome of things can motivate us. But I feel like you laid out the benefits pretty well. Like God's going to free and open some things up. He's going to kind of crack it open and be able to use it. And I would say a area where I may be more helpful is to offer like solutions to get you there.
Come on.
Like you would say, what are the benefits to fitness, and like, what are the benefits to working out? And you would list them, kind of what you did there. But then I'd be like, well, here's some workouts. Okay. So here's where I might be able to help. The first encouragement I would have, and maybe I could say why, so that'll be a benefit. But like what I would encourage people to do is first start making something that you would have fun making, and do not worry about the result.
Ooh.
Don't think about it. And in fact, make it with the kind of idea or plan to get rid of it. Like, can you make something and then ball it up and throw it away? And then can you make something again and ball it up and throw it away? If you don't want to ball it up and throw it away, I know that's like tragic for some people because they really value what they make. Put it in a folder. Don't look at it. And can you do that 100 times? Right? Can you make something and then move on from it and make the next thing? Because one danger of making, like maybe the first few times you make it, is it's like really precious to you. It's this thing you haven't exercised a lot. So I'm working on my jump shot in basketball one day, and I'm like, 10 years old or something. And hey, I made one. Oh, I made 2 in a row. Well, like, I'm not going to stop shooting because I'm just getting good at it. So the same thing with any creative pursuit. Like, the first few you do, by the way, that I guess to say that is to be like, my jump shot probably wasn't beautiful, right? Like your body is working hard, that 10-foot tall hoop and, however tall you are. So, you have to work at it, and it's not going to be beautiful right away. It's not going to be as beautiful as it'll get, right? In terms of how you feel about it.
Yeah.
And so I would say make without, kind of not purposely, purposelessly is what I'm saying. Make without kind of preconceived notion of what the outcome will be, and just make to see what you like, because then maybe by version 10, 12, 15, then we're really getting something we like, right? We're really getting somewhere. You're stretching yourself. You're really getting to the deep ideas, and you're figuring out what kind of style you want to build. So don't worry. Don't wait for somebody's confirmation. Just start making stuff. And you can make it privately, right? If that's a concern of yours, just make things to get output out there. Because what it does is free you up. It's building a foundation where you'll then have the confidence to put it out into the world.
Come on.
Right. So there's very few creative things that we can even define as creative if no one ever knows they exist. Like I wouldn't be able to tell you that's a beautiful piece of furniture unless
you made it.
See it.
Yeah.
Right. I mean, think about how hilarious it would be if like, oh, I could make a YouTube video and somebody's like, well, can I see an example? You're like, no, I can't show anyone. Well, like, how do I even know you made it? Like, what do you mean?
Yeah.
Anybody could say they did a thing.
Yeah.
But if you let fear and shame and doubt override your creative process and stop you from creating before you even start, what's the point? I mean, like,
let's go.
The point is that you need to create.
Yeah.
That I was going to say, what's the point? But the point is that you need to create. That's the benefit, is it unlocks those things. It builds a foundation. So the first thing is make without a goal in mind, right? Just make to make. The second thing is find inspiration from people who are making things that you like, that maybe it's a goal to get towards. And like, I love how Jim Lee drew Wolverine in comic books. So when I was a kid, I would mimic the ways Jim Lee drew Wolverine. And I never got to a level Jim Lee was at, but I got to tell you, just using my hand, drawing, like feeling how it is to create a line and then another line, and like, oh, I'm learning the profile of a face, right? I'm learning the front view of a face. All of a sudden now I can draw faces, right? And it's not like I'm executing at a level of Jim Lee, but I feel confident in drawing something now because I just did it through repetition. So find somebody who inspires you and don't be afraid to copy it.
Let's go.
Like, you like a certain kind of music, try to remake the song you like. See what happens.
Yeah.
Right. I want to learn to play basketball like a certain player. I want to throw a football like a certain player. Study how they throw a football.
Come on.
Right. Copy. And so there's a book by Austin Kleon called, oh no, I'm forgetting the name. It's like Steal.
I thought the name was Oh No. I was like, Austin Kleon. Oh no. Let me look that
up. Oh no. Yeah. It's Steal Like an Artist, I believe. And then he has another book called Show Your Work.
Steal Like an Artist.
And so yeah, sweet. Steal Like an Artist. So all artists, so I believe it was Picasso that was credited with saying, is good artists copy and great artists steal. And so what happens as you become better and better, and I actually agree with this, right? So I copied Jim Lee, right? Like I was trying, like, and I was getting good, but man, I see a graphic designer do something that's awesome. And now I have the tool set to, steal the exact execution and use it in my work and tweak it. I'm stealing that skill.
Let's go.
Like, hey, that's mine. Like, I'm taking that and adding that to my, and it's not, like stealing has this negative connotation, but that's the point, is it's like a shock value word.
Yeah.
To really what you're saying is grab that thing and put it in your toolkit, right? Get your creative toolkit built up. So maybe I'll just echo Austin Kleon is like, hey, copy, show your work, right? Get to a place. But before that, steal, like go see the people's things you like and take those things and add them to your repertoire. And then you'll find over time your confidence builds and it becomes your own style. So artists like Cause, Jim Lee, Stephen Harrington, Keith Haring, and Basquiat, and Andy Warhol, and all these artists, right, have come across my vision and added something to what I now do as a graphic designer.
Ooh.
Right. So I'm taking parts and pieces, but what does that become? I take those parts and pieces, I have them in my toolkit, but I still have to build the chair. Right. So it's a special hammer. And I'm like, oh, that's my Andy Warhol hammer. Let me pull out the color combination. Okay. But I'm adding it to a poster for the show. And so it is my work, right? You don't have to feel guilty for looking who's come before you and just doing it. And by the way, don't talk yourself out of it because, well, they already did it. I don't need to do it. No, because you're going to add your spin to it.
Let's go.
And by the way, it becomes your own style.
Let's go.
Yeah, as a teacher, I don't do good with shame or excuses.
Let's go.
Like and I try to be patient about it, but like, don't make excuses like that. Like, you're going to end up creating what you're going to create.
Yeah.
Just make.
Wow.
Right. And then my last kind of point, and this ties into all of it, is like, do not be afraid to fail. In fact, you need to fail more.
Come on.
Make work, And if you don't feel like you're failing, right, maybe get some humility, but like fail more often, push yourself to make work that you're not comfortable making, because discomfort is where growth is really at. So when I had to learn to edit videos, there was a time where I had never edited a video one time. And I didn't know what a cross dissolve was. I didn't know how to like use the razor blade tool and actually trim the video, you know, like just things I'd never done. So if I never did it, guess what doesn't exist on the internet today is our podcast.
Yeah.
Right. If I didn't spend time in the tools, but I got to tell you, I didn't invent Premiere Pro. I did not invent the razor blade tool. I didn't invent any of these things. It's not like, wait a minute, I programmed my very own program and did it. No, I'm using the tools there. I'm stealing, in quotes again, like I'm pulling those things into my repertoire and combining them into what I would argue church is a new thing.
Yeah.
Right. We've built a new thing. And we try to make it unique. We try to hit on topics like this for today. But again, I don't feel shame in the fact that I'm not the first person to ever talk about creativity and ways to engage with it.
Yeah.
Right. I mean, Rick Rubin just wrote an awesome book about creativity. I believe it's called The Creative Way. Yeah, I'd have to look that up, but I love just hearing his take on stuff because it's a little different than mine. Like I wouldn't make the same book. And ironically, that's the point of him doing the book is like, you need to write your book on creativity. You need to make the painting you want to make.
Yeah.
Wow. And, you know, I guess a point I should really make is like, when you're taking from those artists and like, and kind of gathering those skills, you can directly copy, but like at some point add your flair.
Yeah.
Like it has to become your style. So push yourself to find your style once you build the skills. I just want to be clear. I'm not saying like plagiarize, you know, like, take exactly what they did. It's yours.
Paraphrase
that. I mean, yeah. I'm saying like take their execution and build it into your style. And then it will give you confidence. So, that's it. Did I answer your question like the most long-winded way possible?
Hold up. Wait a minute. Hold up. I gotta say this because we got our things we're good at, but man, sometimes I'm in awe just watching you in your element because
thanks.
Like it's a reason why you won Teacher of the Year, Professor of the Year. You do this. Like God's called you to do this. And I believe you've spoken some life into some dormant creativity of people watching today. I know you've spoken some life into some dormant creativity that's in me. Man, just do it without any expectation. Just do it and throw it away. How life-giving is that? Like something that you know you were supposed to, that's assigned to you to do, just do it and throw it away, or do it and just put it away with no expectation, right? Because there's magic in just getting out and putting your feet in the sand and going, right?
Well, because really the point of that, to be clear, the goal is to make it and put it away because the goal is to make it again.
Yeah.
Right? We don't make one painting and then hang it up on the wall and say, I'm a painter.
Yeah.
I'm done. No, paint something, put it away, go do another painting, go do it because you're working those muscles.
Yeah.
I just want to be clear about what the point of that was. It wasn't like burn your work and now we're all pyromaniacs and we're burning down our creativity. No. We're executing again and again and again because at some point you get comfortable putting it away because you know you can do it again.
Yeah.
Right?
That's
every
good.
basketball game I play, that's not my last basketball game because I know I can go do it again.
Yeah.
Right? But if you make a shot one time and you walk away, I guess you'll never know what your real potential was and your purpose was in that area.
Yeah.
Right.
Wow.
So
that's
keep
good.
making, I like it. I just wanted to clarify because I felt like you're right. The way I said it, if I leave it just at that, it's like, so he's just saying like,
throw it away,
make stuff and throw it away. No, you could keep it. You can like look back on it. In fact, sometimes it's good to look back on it and say like, look how far I've come.
Yeah.
But the point is like, keep making and I would say consistently.
Yeah.
Like find some time interval that's comfortable for your life. Or I mean, maybe uncomfortable for your life, like push yourself a little bit and make whatever that content or whatever the,
whatever it is,
creative medium is, the output, do that thing at a pace that's like sustainable, but there's some growth areas. You can maybe make it a little uncomfortable. Yeah. Cause then it gets comfortable. So anyway, you want to create, it's going to require you to create.
Dude,
as it turns out.
I think
weird how that works.
I think you're right. I think I kind of hit on some of the benefits and then you took us and gave us practical steps, man. Like like re-listen to the Professor Jason come out and just lay that out for you, give you like 3 definite steps to follow. Here are the reasons. Here are the benefits. Hey, I believe we're unleashing some creativity in people's lives today. Man, that was so powerful. Jason, thank you, man, for unpacking that for us. Man, that was so good. I just want to pray us out. If your heart has been like just encouraged about this conversation, man, God's doing a work inside of you. Don't ignore it. Heavenly Father, God, we thank you, Lord, that we do this, Lord. We thank you that we get to talk about creativity, God. We get to expound on what you have done in us, God. Help us to be a light in a dark world, Lord, to bring our talents and our gifts, Lord, to the world, Lord, so that you may get the glory. And God, Lord, I just thank you for everyone who tuned in, all the hearers, God. And I just pray, God, Lord, that you just encourage them to push forward, to create something, and for you to get the glory. In Jesus' name we pray. Amen. Thank you for tuning in.
Yeah, man. See you next time, guys.
See you next time.